people in Canada value life. You know, we spend billions of dollars on health. We value life. Over in those countries, there's not the same value. They do things to humans you wouldn't believe. Hitler was, if he got England, the next one was a world conquer business.
There was German submarine in the Gulf of St. Lawrence. That's awful close to Saskatchewan when you think of that. If us Canadians hadn't gone overseas, the Nazis would have come to England and across, eh? So I think it was just a matter of wanting to protect the Canada, the nice living, the good living that we have, the abundance of food. There's so much in Canada.
In the spring of '42, when I was in the hospital, and when I got out of hospital, I came home here, and I was appalled at the attitudes, some of the attitudes that I experienced, because I knew that the people in Britain were just within a thread of losing. We were in our encounters with that I had been exposed to, you know, we weren't even a fair opposition for the submarines. They just practically played with us like a cat playing with a mouse.
The enemy was at least 2 to 3 years ahead of us in everything that they did, their equipment, their everything. And so you knew that we hoped to catch up. But I think when states entered the war, when they actually entered, you had a feeling sooner or later we would win, or if there is a winner.
When we hit El Alamein, the Germans, their attitude was they'd take their top pilots, very well-trained pilots, they'd send them over to Russia, they'd be over there for a while, then they might be in France, and then the next thing they'd send them out to the Middle East. Well, these German pilots, some of them had over 300 kills when they retired finally. And there's one person, his name was Marseille, he was a German ace. He'd shot down 157 Spitfires and Hurricanes during Alamein. He was probably the top ace in the Middle East. But they had these other people come out with all kinds of kills. If our group had 30 or 40, that was the tops. We were in the top flying Spitfires at that time. And I give Naval Duke credit. He spotted large numbers of German transports carrying supply to the Germans in Tunisia. He called down to Wing Commander Gleed, there's transport right on the deck, go after them. Gleed said, I can't see anything. So Naval Duke and R6 went down and got stuck into these transports and shot down, I think, 5 on the occasion. They were big Savoy 79s, different planes like that. And anyhow, that started something. All of a sudden, the Americans and the other squadrons started going after these planes, and it was just slaughter, shooting them down.
We were based out of Scapa Flow, which is the base of the home fleet, the British home fleet. And we were attached to the British Navy. We were Canadian ships, but we were attached to the British Navy. And so I served from there up to Russia, and that was most of my service was that. And we were disengaged from the convoys to go down to the invasion. And we went down about 2 weeks ahead of the invasion and went up and down the French coast and shelled every light that we could see and so forth, just to stir the coast up. I mean, that was the part of the strategy. And then we took the minesweepers ahead of the troops and swept the channels, and we were in position about 1 o'clock in the morning, and the troops came in about 5. And so I was there for that in Juno Beach, and then you look with awe at what's happening. I mean, as the numbers, as I've heard, 4,000 aircraft coming over, all with black and white stripes under their wings so that we wouldn't shoot at them. And 4,000 ships. It's mind-boggling. The organization there, you have to say, well, some son of a gun knew what he was doing when he put all this together, because it was amazing how it came, and the troops came up when the unloading came, and then they came off the bigger troop ships, and they went into the landing craft, and the landing craft would circle till they got whatever it was, 10 or 12 of them, to make a wave of an attack, and then they'd off to the beach. And then the Mulberry Harbor, nobody knew anything about that, and that came in. And that was an amazing sight to see those big sections of that harbor come in, and then they just opened the cocks and sunk it down, and there was a ready-made jetty. We had an army captain of artillery on board with us, and they landed those paratroops and so forth, and they were artillerymen, and they called fire in on themselves. They spotted targets and so forth and called fire, and so we would shell with this, under the direction of this captain of artillery, we would shell in these positions. Now, as I recall, we lost 57 contacts that first morning. That is, they would draw in fire on themselves. 10 minutes, 15 minutes later, they were captured, and you'd have to find another one that was signaling and so forth. And we could only shell so far because we were 4 or 5 inch shells. So we could, by noon, the troops had got beyond our range. And then the big boys come in behind with the 16-inch guns, and they started firing. Then we come back to the beach, and each evening we'd pull out and sweep the channel for E-boats and so forth, because the E-boats would harass our shipping and so forth. So we'd chase them at nights, and then we went down and they started to leapfrog the invasions down the coast or up the coast, I guess you'd say, to the Netherlands, and we sort of took the seaside of that, and the big 6-inchers could get at us off the land, but we couldn't fire back. So the Germans have a firing habit of firing under, over, and in the middle, and so they'd fire twice, and then we'd move ahead, and we avoided it, never got hit. But it's interesting to sit there all day under gunfire and you can't do anything about it. Our boys took a hell of a slapping. I mean, those first waves going in, I mean, they hit that beach, and you'd look over and wonder how many that were going to move again, you know. But of course the big battle took place later around Caen, when the Germans finally got their forces in order and fought back.
I guess before we got to Fort Caen was a bottleneck. It was a problem, and we made a bad mistake of bombing it, so the place was rubble and very difficult to get through in terms of vehicles, our carriers, or even infantry on foot. There weren't many Germans left in there, and there probably weren't many when we bombed it, but it created an obstacle for us. And then when we started down the road to Falaise in August, and I'll think hard about the date, 9th, I guess, of August, the divisional commander had been wounded, and we had one casualty back in the wagon lines, I think, well, one that I know of. And then on the 14th is when we really got bombed by our air support we literally sat there and were bombed, and there's nothing we could do about it. Troops were tempted to shoot at them, obviously. We never know exactly what happened. I think somebody bombed short to start with, and then everybody said, guess we go. You could look up and see them coming down right at you, and I think it was the fact that we were so helpless. There was no way of communicating directly to the aircraft. The report of the short bombing went all the way back to England before they could turn it off. And subsequently they arranged for signal detachments to be with forward troops so that if there was support from aircraft directly above, there was communication from that signal unit that was with the infantry to the people that were flying up above. We got it. It was bad, and I say, in addition to equipment losses and people losses, little problem with morale. You know, these are supposed to be helping us. So we were very happy the next time we got air support. They didn't go over the top. They went this way. It stunk to high heaven. I can still close my eyes and see horses turned up with their feet up in the air. The Germans had a lot of horse-drawn transport. And, you know, when they were bombed and shelled and killed, there were, dead horses. And let's face it, this was August, hot, stinky, flies. It was a mess.
All the Canadian warships had a doctor. Normally you don't have a doctor, you just have a sick bay attendant. The Dr. Gould, he was examining us all. Anyway, this fella came on the ship that morning. He hadn't been 24 hours on the ship. Now, we knew something was wrong with this guy because he was in the Carly float, in the middle of the Carly float, and he was doing a lot of moaning. And when the doctor examined him, he had his right leg was crushed. So the doctor says, I'm going to have to take that leg off. We're standing on the deck of the tank landing craft. It's a steel deck, and there's no place to sit down. There's 60 guys there, eventually getting onto that, and there's no room in the quarters. They're very small quarters for the crew. Only 3 of a crew on the tank landing craft. Well, they bring him out on put the hammock down on the steel deck, put him on the deck, and the doctor, it's almost unbelievable, he amputated that guy's leg, and I was standing, there was no place to sit down. I was standing about from here to that wall, you know, and we all witnessed this operation. Guys hold him down, and they give him some rum, and but they had no anesthetic, no chloroform. So the doctor, all he had was a meat saw, a butcher knife, and an ordinary needle and thread, and he took that leg off, and I never. When he went to work on the leg, he's right down there. That guy let out a scream I still hear. I never thought a noise like that could come out of a human being. There's a crash landing boat came out, and they picked up the worst wounded. They got him ashore, the guy, his leg, and we were told after that they got him to the hospital, and the doctors there examined that amputation. They couldn't improve on it. It was absolutely, but he and a lot of the guys were in the hospitals over there. Some got home for Christmas, and some were there almost a year. They were so badly wounded.
the Germans were always around, but we never thought too much of that. We just had a job to do, and just like anybody else, we were trained to do it, and so that was a good thing. And the only time we were up in Eindhoven, and we spent the time up there, and that was the winter. That was one of the coldest winters I think Europe at that particular time had. And our armies and everything was at a standstill. We couldn't bring up supplies, one thing or another. The Germans were more or less the same thing. If they only knew that we were just at a stagnant. So we sat in Eindhoven there for maybe a couple of months, and very few wounded were coming into our camp and one thing or another. And on New Year's morning of 45, we were just going to go out to the camp and one thing or another, and we were stopped because we had to cross the tarmac, and there was a bunch of tippies ready to take off on it. And then all of a sudden we heard this racket and one thing or another, and we're in the back of this truck and happened to look out. We just thought some of our own pilots were still celebrating New Year's. But when we seen the planes coming around, we seen the black crosses on them, we knew they were Germans. So we kind of hit the deck underneath the trucks, and that was the worst place we could be, because that's where the Germans were coming in from the east. And of course, we're facing the Sunday, and they did a good job, by shooting us up. And luck would have it, if we had stayed in our truck, it was about the only vehicle around there wasn't even touched. It was amazing. But every other truck and planes and stuff like that were, and they kept coming at us one thing or another, and they did a good job. And I can remember helping another chap try to get one of the pilots out of one of these tiffies, and of course he was dead. And we watched how the planes were coming around the field, and so we figured we better get out of here. And we ran, and I think I broke the 1 mile record, because I don't know how I ran so quick over some obstacles, landed in a pothole with water. Couldn't do nothing to see these planes coming over. But later on, everything, then we went over to our camp, grabbed the ambulances. We had about 4 or 5, and I was like driving, and got one of the medics and go around the field and pick up these wounded, our wounded. And, at the end of the day, that you sat back and one thing or another, like we were finished. And I can remember going in, and it's the first time, went in the mess hall, I get something to eat, and I was by myself. There's other chaps there, and I kind of broke down. I cried. And that's the first time I asked for my mom. It was a sad part. I had nobody, and of course I was still a kid. And I guess it was just, everything was going on, And that was a terrible day. I can always remember that particular day. And I hope, not to go through that again.
In the war, I never wanted to brag about it. People suffer. Kids, nothing to eat. They're walking around begging for something to eat. But we had to go on, They destroyed their homes, everything. I seen one woman killed, and a little baby there crying. I puke. Oh, terrible things I seen. I hope that never go like that in our country.
War is hell for 10 minutes and boredom for another month. I think talking to veterans, it's still the most important part of their life. It was that period of 2, 3, 4, 5 years that was the most important thing in their life. I guess that's what it is. It grew me up. It took me from a callow youth with no objectives and lazy as a cut cat to a grown man and willing to take responsibility. It's often said the statement is that we became a country in World War I and World War II. Yeah, that's true. That's true. The country pulled together, everybody had a son or a brother or somebody in the services, so, you know, everybody had a part to play in the war. A lot of them come back and they don't make the adjustment. They've been shaken up. We now have all sorts of fancy names for it, but they just don't get back online. They get divorced, or they suicide, or they drink, or they do this and that and the other thing. It's very hard on young men. And still too, and I teach in the university, and I've had young men come into my classes that have been over in Bosnia and so forth, and some of them are pretty badly shaken up.
In Canada, I'm terribly concerned that we may drift away from keeping people prepared. From the experience that I had, the whole process of going to sea and fighting the sea in that kind of a ship with which nobody had any experience. They didn't know what it could do or if it could do anything. And they just said, well, this is your job, go and do it. And that's not the way we should fight a war. And I just hope that that Canada will maintain their technological capabilities so that we can hold our own and express an opinion that's backed up with some resources.